Hello everyone, welcome to Short Shot Archery, and today we're doing a review on the KSL Jet6 Vanes by K&K Archery. So I've been testing these out for several months now, and I think it's time to do a review. I'm going to start out with just talking about the packaging, and then I'm going to move all the way through to the performance of the vanes and, my results with them. Alright, now let's get into the packaging. The Jet6 vanes have a really unique packaging. Most vanes come in a little, baggie, kind of like this. But for the Jet6 vanes, they come in this, pretty sturdy box. Now, hopefully you can see it has gotten crushed a little bit, but this box has been sitting in my bow case going to tournaments and going to my lesson once a week where I have to pack my bow case up and drive somewhere. So it's been getting beaten around in the bow case, and it's still pretty much holding its shape. But most importantly, the vanes inside are not getting damaged, because in the past, when I was using some other company's vanes, they would get squished from being in the plastic wrapper, because something plastic isn't really hard. It wasn't a hard plastic. It was just this baggy, pretty much a Ziploc bag, and that allowed the vanes to get crushed pretty easily. And there was multiple occasions with other brands of vanes that I had to throw out the vanes because they were already damaged before I even put them on my arrow. So I feel like this packaging is actually a plus, and I feel like it was worth covering in this review because it's different than what the rest of the industry is doing, and I think there is some benefit to it. So we open up the box here, and we'll check out what's inside. You have your information guide, your tape. There's actually two sets of this tape. You have your arrow wraps, the heat shrink tubing, pretty much, that helps keep the ends of the vanes down, and of course the vanes themselves. So it's nice that everything is included. You would hope that everything's included, so I'm glad that is the case for these vanes. Otherwise that would be kind of disappointing. But another cool note is, what you saw before, is they also offer additional arrow wraps and additional tape that you can purchase separately from the box of vanes themselves. So if you're somebody that goes through a lot of tape to hold down your arrows, like you try to reuse vanes a lot, but you find yourself just retaping them, then maybe it's worthwhile picking up some extra tape. I felt like they supplied a fair amount of tape. You can never have enough, but I feel like it wasn't lacking. So now that I have these all laid out here, I'm going to go through each one individually, starting with our components that actually put the vanes on the arrow. So we'll start off with the tape itself. I like the layout of this tape. It's pretty easy to take off the sheet. One thing that you should note is don't just carelessly peel the tape off, because sometimes the tape will stick to the wax paper that is here, and it will not come off with the translucent blue strip. I had that happen a couple times when I wasn't paying attention, but if you're intentionally like, okay, I need to take off a piece of tape, and you're paying attention, it comes off easily, and it won't stay stuck to the wax paper. Now, I'm not saying that is like a flaw in this design. I've had plenty of struggles with other brands that all the tape comes attached together and you have to separate it by hand. I've had instances where the backing, the paper backing, just would not come off, no matter what I tried, and I ended up distorting the strip of tape and ended up throwing out that piece of tape. So overall, I do feel like this is an improvement, but you still have to pay attention when you're taking the tape off to fletch your arrows. And I think you should be paying attention anyway, because fletching your arrows is an important process in the arrow building process and the job of an archer. Other than that, I felt like the tape was sufficiently sticky. as good, if not better than other brands that I have tried. One other point would be, is if you're somebody that likes to stick vanes back onto your arrows, you can probably do that with this tape. The only thing I don't recommend is if you're shooting in the rain, you're knocking off vanes, from shooting really tight groups. Sticking the vanes back onto this tape doesn't always work. Of course, it is raining, so the rain's messing with the stickiness of the tape, but it is something that I feel like is noteworthy, because I know a lot of people do try to save money and they'll try to re-stick on vanes. So you can pretty much do it under all normal circumstances, but if you're shooting in the rain and your arrows are getting soaked and you shot a vane off, you should probably avoid just trying to stick that vane back on. So next up, I want to talk about the arrow wraps, and they're one of the more unique aspects of the Jet6 vanes. Of course, the vanes themselves are probably the most unique aspect of these vanes, but it's definitely worth mentioning because there was a little bit of, I would say, not quite controversy behind them, but some archers I found were really struggling with putting these arrow wraps on the vanes. So basically, it's a little piece of heat shrink tubing, and it's recommended that you use either a flame, but even more recommended that you use a hair dryer to heat up the arrow wrap, and then the tubing shrinks, and it shrinks to fit, fairly firmly around the very tips of your vanes and onto your arrow shaft without damaging either. The idea itself, I think, is pretty great, and it's really unique to the whole vane industry. Forever, everybody was using some kind of tape. It almost seemed like it was like pinstriping tape, but I feel like this was a new take on that. For me, it worked fairly well, but I also have a background in using heat shrink tubing and things like that. So for me, it was pretty easy to do, but a lot of other people had a struggle. Some tips for making this a little bit easier: you probably want to use like a hair dryer. That way you don't have to worry about melting your vanes, because some people manage to melt their vanes with a handheld lighter. And you don't have to worry about keeping that lighter too long on your arrow and damaging the carbon. I don't think that would happen unless you're really holding it there. I've been using a handheld lighter the entire time, and basically you turn your flame on, you already have your tubing all set up, and it's like 2 seconds, and the heat shrink tubing just sucks right onto that vane, and you're done. So I don't know where some of the people were getting their complaints about, oh, too much heat next to the carbon arrow. You heat up your points and your pin nocks to put them in. This is less, heat than that, so I don't see a problem there. My recommendation is definitely the hair dryer. You can make it work. If your hair dryer at home is not working, then it's probably not strong enough. Maybe you have like a travel-sized one, and you need like a regular-sized hair dryer. Other than that, you can always pick up some pinstriping tape and use that. Plenty of archers have in the past. I personally have not tried them with the pinstriping tape, but they should shoot exactly the same as using the arrow wraps. Alright, so now that we have covered our packaging, our tape, and our arrow wraps, let's get to the most important part, the vanes. These vanes are pretty cool. It's really neat how see-through they are, but some other more important aspects, well, the color is the most important, but they're very durable. I have not had a lot of problems with them, breaking down or falling apart. They take a hit from another arrow pretty well. They maintain their shape. Of course, if you do hit them direct on with another arrow, say, here's a good example. So you got an arrow in the target and another one comes in and they collide, especially in the vane area, then you probably want to switch out your vanes, but that would be the case with any brand of vanes. So one of the coolest design features about these vanes that I really like is the fact that they wrap around the arrow shaft. In the past, I've used vanes where not only did the tape not hold that great, but because of how the vanes were designed, the tape would stick to the vane, but the vane was so strong in its form and how it was molded that it would lift the tape up from the arrow. So I had veins on my arrows from another brand, and less than 25% of the tape was actually attaching the vein to the arrow shaft. Kind of scary, and it's also very inconsistent. In my use of these veins on my arrows, I would say like 98% of the tape is sticking to the vein, and it's also sticking to the arrow. The vein's not lifting up from the arrow itself. I think that's a major improvement. It's definitely making them more consistent. So one other thing that it's making better as well, because the tape is sticking to both the vein and the arrow consistently, there's no gaps. So when you fletch a new dozen arrows and you have all that fresh tape, you don't get as many arrows that get stuck together, so you don't end up pulling out like 2 or 3 arrows at once when you're trying to make a shot. Now I know at practice, not such a big deal, but on the shooting line, it can be a real pain, and it's something that you just don't want to deal with when you're just trying to shoot for score and just stay as calm as possible and stay in your shot. So in the past, I've had to apply baby powder to my veins in order to keep down the stickiness from the tape that was not sticking to the vein or to the arrow. With these veins, I have to use minimum baby powder, if none at all. The last couple of times that I've fixed, just 1 or 2 veins that I really messed up, I didn't use any baby powder because I just didn't find it necessary, because it wasn't creating this hassle with all these, fletched arrows sticking together. So for me, this is a very important point, that these veins fixed and kind of covered. So now let me move into one little thing that I did have a problem with, and this happened on 2 occasions. I was shooting pretty good groups, and I had some really close shots where the arrows hit into each other, but they hit into each other at, knock-on veins. So one arrow in the target, the other arrow coming in, its veins hit into the knock of that arrow in the target. It severely damaged the front of the vein. Now, me trying to test out things and trying to get, the feel for the product and how it performs, I then went and shot that arrow again with the very damaged vein. This was so damaged, if you were at a tournament and did this, you would definitely put that arrow aside and be like, oh, well, you're out of the game, buddy. Time to pick up another one. So what happened was, when I shot the arrow, because that one vein was so messed up in the front, the arrow actually flew pretty crazy all the way down to the target, and a shot that felt like it should have been a 9 or a 10 ended up in about the 4 ring. This happened on 2 occasions, totally different times and totally different days, about a month apart, but both times it was the same. I shot a tight group, 2 arrows collided, I really messed up the vein to the point where it was almost coming off the tape, but not quite. I just went through and decided to shoot it anyway just to see what would happen, and it did actually mess with the flight. Now in my mind, I think this is actually an important indication on the performance of these veins. In the past, I've shot other companies' veins where I would have half a vein, the whole top's missing, or I would have just the front half or just the back half of a vein. I've shot arrows with 1 vein on them and the other 2 ripped off, 2 vein arrows, all different companies' veins, and every time the arrow pretty much goes where you're aiming it. If it's a good shot, regardless if it had 3 veins, 1 vein, or 2.5 veins, they always would go in the 9 or 10 ring if I shot a good shot. Now, some of those more iffy shots, sure, were they a little more drastic? Were they further out than some of the other iffy shots with an arrow that had all its veins? Yeah, but in the case of the Jet 6s, I find that if a vein is really messed up to the point where you wouldn't shoot it, but you shoot it anyway, it does affect the flight of the arrow. So then, in my mind, I feel like the veins themselves are actually improving the flight of the arrow. I don't know if it's because they're straightening out the arrow sooner before it actually gets to the target, but there's definitely an effect when you damage the veins or you shoot arrows with less than the 3 veins. This is my experience with them, and I've ran into this twice, And I really just felt that was really important to share with you guys if you're looking to pick up these vanes. Okay, so that pretty much wraps up this review. I've purchased 3 packs of these vanes now, and I'm really happy with them. Now, I use the 1 3/4 right-handed Jet6 vanes. I have not tried the 2-inch. So far, my results have been pretty great. I've been really happy with the groups that I've been shooting. Of course, it is me and, my shooting form and my experience, so it could vary. But overall, I feel like these are a really well-designed vane. I'm happy with them. I'm going to keep shooting them. Of course, I will keep testing out other products to try to, find, what works best for me and do reviews on them for you guys. So thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you found this helpful. I really did my best to try to, gather information not only from what I was doing, but from other people that were shooting these vanes to try to give you guys the best, review possible. Other than that, thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe, and as always, happy shooting.